We've barely started the year, and already Bob Byrne is skeptical that we'll meet our goals. He just called and gave me a list of things he wants to discuss when I see him next week. Where do you stand on this program, and how do you plan to get that done?
Well, I guess we should expect that from a new regional director. He's probably eager to make his mark.
That's part of it. But he also sees our goals as pretty challenging and is afraid we won't achieve them.
Well, I just hope he realizes how challenging our goals really are. We're supposed to get the number of resident patients down to 1,400 by the end of the year, even though admissions have gone through the roof. And there's no end in sight to the flow of patients coming from the city's overcrowded facilities.
No doubt that's one reason he keeps wanting to look over my shoulder.
Well, what more does he want to know? We went through our approach with him last quarter, how we're involving every level of staff at each stage in planning the changes we have to make.
Well, I'm afraid Byrne doesn't accept our teamwork approach.
But we all agreed on the need to develop and implement new accelerated treatment programs so that patients can be discharged to community programs sooner.
That's right.
And also that with more patients but no added resources, we need to have everyone more focused on patient treatment. Oh, not just the clinicians, but right down to the nurses and mahadas on the wards. They're all being asked to change the way they work with their patients so they become extensions of the treatment plan, not just caretakers.
That's right. There's no disagreement about what needs to be done, only how to do it. Byrne is uneasy about our teamwork approach because it takes a lot of time to involve everyone in the planning.
But the changes we're making are complex and they affect everyone, so everyone should be involved in planning them.
Well, Jeff, of course I agree with you. But Bob Byrne would say that with so much to do within the time and resource constraints we have, people should just be given a roadmap. As managers, we should lay out specifically how we want them to do their jobs differently.
You can't just give people a list and expect them to change overnight, like turning a light bulb on and off. We have a lot of longtime staff whose jobs haven't changed much over the years.
I know.
So until they understand and accept the changes we need, their morale and the quality of care the patients receive is bound to suffer. Well, I guess I shouldn't be surprised by Byrne's view. I mean, after all, he doesn't have a clinical background. He's an administrative manager.
And from his administrative point of view, we should have already spelled out all the steps to achieve our goals. And we should have adopted procedures and treatment programs from other facilities and used the models the central office has developed.
The central office models I've seen are generic, so that supposedly any facility can use them. But really, no facility can use them without doing a lot of work to adapt them. And the treatment programs and procedures from other facilities don't fit us because, well, we're different. We're larger and older and undergoing renovations, and we have a different mix of patients.
I agree with you, Jeff. So I'll try to convince Byrne to let us do things the way we think is best. But I'll appreciate anything you can do along the way to help me win his confidence.
Okay, Eleanor. I understand. And in this past quarter, we stepped up efforts on our new computer-based patient information system.
As we build this system, it will help us diagnose, treat, and ultimately discharge patients faster.
And place them in community programs that are best suited for their needs.
Patient profiles, tracking progress against treatment plans, community program requirements. Sounds like a fancy system. Let's hope it can start paying off for you soon. Now let's see. Where do you stand on procedures for monitoring living conditions and on new activity therapy programs?
Last week, I reviewed each unit chief's plan to improve living conditions. They've set priorities based on what they feel is the best way to get the staff involved in and committed to the changes they need to make.
We're also working on environmental rounds and on expanding the roles of the clinical team members. We're getting feedback from the nurses and the mahadas now, so we'll develop new procedures and policies in the next quarter.
And we've made progress on improving patient activities, too. I have someone in each unit working with the staff to get their ideas on what new activities they need.
Let me stop you here. I realize you have a lot of irons in the fire, but critical problems are being relegated to group discussions. Living conditions and improved treatment and activity programs are your most critical goals, yet you've made the least progress on them.
Those improvements take more effort up front to do right. We believe it's important to get everyone involved in the changes we need to make.
I understand. But critical matters are being pursued in a cumbersome, time-consuming way. I think more straightforward action is needed.
Do we want things done fast or do we want them done right?
Well, Bob, we want to make these changes as fast as possible, of course. But it's a matter of mobilizing the staff. We want them to participate in the changes.
The bottom line is that we will meet our goals, but we have to involve the unit staffs if we want quality results. We can't compromise quality.
But I don't see how you can move ahead quickly enough on living conditions and on treatment programs unless they get your full attention and you give your people clear guidelines. I think you should review your action plans and come up with guidelines and milestones so that you don't fall behind on those programs. If you fall behind, you'll get into real trouble.
Jeff, that was a tough meeting. What Bob Byrne heard is that we're doing a lot of planning but not making tangible progress.
Byrne will come around when he sees the merit of our approach.
He's not going to wait. To get him off our backs, we may need to make some changes. What about asking the unit chiefs to do what Byrne wants? Issue guidelines to improve environmental rounds and to ensure that living conditions comply with standards.
Well, it's not that simple. Each unit is in a different position. For example, Jose Marco in admissions has to concentrate on overcrowding and just getting his patients housed. One of Bowder's units is turned upside down because of the renovations. Plus, he's got about 10 new people.
I understand. But from Byrne's point of view, the unit chiefs have had 3 months already.
But they've needed time to get on top of their problems. They have their staffs lined up to accomplish things in a certain sequence. There'd be an uproar if I told them to scrap their plans and concentrate on the results Byrne wants to see. That would undermine our commitment to let them make the improvements the way they think is best.
No one wants them to scrap their plans. What Byrne wants is for us to issue guidelines and set milestones to assure that they're making progress and that they're not reinventing the wheel. Do you think that can be done?
There's no happy alternative here. Basically, this comes down to doing what the desk jockeys upstairs want or doing what makes sense. But if you want, I can take some steps to pacify Byrne. I can get 2 of the geriatric units to modify their plans a little. Then they can begin making environmental rounds using improved procedures in about 3 weeks. So, I can play the game, if you want.
Is that what you're recommending?
There's no happy alternative here. Basically, this comes down to doing what the desk jockeys upstairs want or doing what makes sense. But if you want, I can take some steps to pacify Byrne. I can get 2 of the geriatric units to modify their plans a little. Then they can begin making environmental rounds using improved procedures in about 3 weeks. So, I can play the game, if you want.
Is that what you're recommending?
No. I want to support the unit chiefs' plans. They know the specifics about their patients and unit conditions better than Byrne ever will. There's no reason not to rely on their professional judgment.
Well, it's clear that Byrne's not as confident as we are.
I also think he's underestimating the risks of trying to do too much too fast. If we don't lay the foundation properly, we won't end up accelerating treatment. It can easily lead to revolving door care.
Okay, I'll try to convince Byrne that the unit chiefs should carry out their plans the way they think is best. But give me whatever milestones we can point to as the year goes on to demonstrate progress.
All right, Eleanor. I'll talk to the unit chiefs and get more details about their plans. But I'm concerned that milestones could give Byrne false expectations. The unit chiefs need flexibility to decide as they go along what their next step should be.
I agree the unit chiefs need flexibility, but I need some milestones in order to deal with Byrne.
I understand. You know, it bothers me, though, that Byrne is forcing us to defend ourselves. He should be learning about why we do things the way we do, seeing the benefits, and finding more ways to help us. Jose, thanks for taking time for this unscheduled meeting.
No problem. Come on in, have a chair.
Thanks. Eleanor, the directors, and I have just finished a first quarter post-mortem and second quarter prognosis with Bob Byrne. Now, Byrne's concerned that we're not progressing fast enough. So I need more information about where you are and your second quarter plans to help assure Byrne that we're on track.
Well, I think we're on track. Last quarter was pretty chaotic, you know? Every day we were getting new admissions from the city without any advance warning of how many or what their problems were. But now, by 4:30, the city facilities tell us who's on the way. That gives us an hour to prepare. And we've also juggled some assignments so we can do intakes quickly, so that part of the problem is settling down.
Good. Any other resources you need to help deal with the flow of new admissions?
Sure, about 10 more people. We're running 35 to 40 patients on the wards now. 2 years ago, the average was 25 per ward.
I know. And there's been no increase in staff, so this is a lot more to handle than anyone's ever had to before.
And the strain on the staff really shows. I make it a point to go around each ward every day, and I run into a lot of situations where the staff takes out their frustrations on each other.
I'm sure that's true.
Yeah, but I think we're gradually getting the pieces in place that should ease the frustrations. Mostly administrative so far, though.
So, are you ready to turn your attention to clinical matters like improving the treatment programs?
Well, Jeff, I just had a staff meeting to discuss the next best steps for our unit. And we agreed to go ahead with reconfiguring our wards.
Reconfiguring the wards? That'll be pretty disruptive. Shifting patients to new wards, shifting staff.
True, but sooner or later, we need to change the outmoded practice of assigning patients to wards according to the county they come from rather than according to their functional ability. Look, we need secure wards for the dangerous city patients, and we should have open wards and intermediate wards for transitional patients to let them experiment with progressive amounts of independence.
I agree that reconfiguring the wards is a long-needed improvement. It's the timing that concerns me. Wouldn't it be better to take care of all your problems with overcrowding and living conditions first and start work on new clinical programs and procedures before reorganizing your whole unit? You know, solve the current problems before giving your staff new ones?
Well, there is no best time to reconfigure the wards, but if we group patients by ability first, then it'll be easier to tailor the environmental conditions and our new treatment programs to their needs.
As you know, Jose, I've often said that you and the other unit chiefs should have the flexibility to make improvements in the way you think is best for your staff and patients. But while you're moving patients around and reassigning staff, priorities like improving treatment programs and monitoring living conditions will be delayed.
Only temporarily. I figure it'll take about 3 weeks to shift all the patients and staff around. Then the treatment teams will need time to assess their newly assigned patients and update their evaluations and treatment plans.
That's right. They'll lose continuity with some patients and have to get to know a lot of new ones all at once. That's pretty time-consuming.
Yes, but we figure that in about 2 months, we'll be squared away and able to specify our plans for improving living conditions and treatment programs. From then on, though, we'll be able to focus on those priorities in a way that I believe will result in faster and better progress.
But can you make up for the delay and discharge as many patients by the end of the year as we've planned on?
I think so. My staff thinks so, too. But frankly, nobody really knows how effective our new programs will be. Only that they'll be more effective if we first put the patients into secure, open, and intermediate wards. So long term, at least, we think reconfiguring the wards is the thing to do. I think so. My staff thinks so, too. But frankly, nobody really knows how effective our new programs will be. Only that they'll be more effective if we first put the patients into secure, open, and intermediate wards. So long term, at least, we think reconfiguring the wards is the thing to do.
Well, I see the advantages of reconfiguring your unit before you focus on improving conditions and treatment programs. If I were in your shoes, I'd probably reconfigure the wards later or do it gradually over time. But since you and your staff have agreed on this approach, I'll go along.
Look, will it help you if I lay out a schedule for the next quarter? You know, when we'll complete reconfiguring the wards, when we'll have our improvements in treatment ready to implement, that sort of thing?
Yes, that'll help respond to Bob Byrne's concerns.
All right, then. Jeff, look, I'm glad you're letting us do this, because I think it would be a mistake to override the staff on what we've agreed to do. This is really the first opportunity we've had to involve people down to the first line in a major decision.
Before we're through, we'll need everyone to make significant changes in the way they do their jobs. So, I agree. It's important to talk things over with them and to listen. So, Arnie, I wanted to get more specific information from you on where you are so that Eleanor can convince Bob Byrne we're on the right track.
Where am I? in limbo, to be truthful. I have 2 units that are not really units. The term unit implies a cohesiveness, a clarity, integrity of purpose. No. What I have are 2 separate groups of loosely linked individuals. A new staff who have to be schooled in our thinking, an unwieldy number of patients, not enough resources to accomplish anything but the barest minimum. Then, to prevent me further from doing the psychiatric work I was hired for, I have my time eaten away by meetings and endless paperwork.
I promise to keep this meeting short.
No, I don't mean you, Jeff.
Okay, but I'm serious about helping you in any way I can. I know that operating 2 units with a lot of new people is difficult.
It just seems like the system is more interested in reports and numbers than in people. But the concept behind our 2 units is exciting. A completely new approach to treating regressed and severely impaired patients. We can revolutionize their treatment and set a new national standard. That's what keeps us going each day.
Let's talk more about what you need so that we're sure your units can keep making advances in treatment. At the same time, we need to make sure living conditions remain in full compliance. What steps have you taken?
Well, my primary role right now is to develop my staff. We have a special mission in the 2 units. We need everyone to work together in a consistent, reinforcing manner. So, we're spending as much time as we can as a group to work out our philosophy and make sure everyone is a part of it. That's number 1. 2 is to shape our conclusions into specific procedures for every ward to follow, to reflect our philosophy in policies and procedures that will drive the staff's behavior with patients. This is a very sensitive process.
Let's stop here a minute so I'm sure I understand. We talked a month or so ago about the staff training you wanted to do. Have you completed that?
Yes. And we've accomplished what you asked us to do on the personalized care model and the input into the new computer systems. At the same time, we've had to address the disruption on the wards with all the new patients, moving them out of wards that will be renovated.
Are the staffs able to run their wards effectively now? Are conditions under control, the overcrowding issue settled?
I would say we have done everything we can under dire circumstances. It was difficult with such a new staff, but we did it.
Have you been on the wards yourself, supervising their efforts?
Each morning, the team leaders and I meet to discuss what they have to do that day. Once we've completed the new procedures, all ward staff will know exactly what to do because they'll all follow the same procedures. They'll have a model to follow.
Are you making rounds to follow up?
With 2 units to manage, I have little time. The treatment team leaders do that. But I have an open door policy so they can come to me anytime.
What about your plans for the improved patient activities?
The new policies and procedures we develop will cover those as well.
In effect, you're trying to tie in all the changes and improvements together. Plan everything out carefully up front, then implement all the changes around the same time.
That is correct. A complete package for running the units. With 2 units and so many new people, it's a mistake to go about this piecemeal. I have to make sure the plans are thorough and that we're all singing from the same sheet.
I'm a little concerned about the time it may take for you to put all this into effect. And won't that much change at once be difficult to manage?
Not if the staff has been planning it all along, ironing out the details. The planning is what is most difficult. The implementation is relatively straightforward. Making changes is our business, Jeff, our life's work. In my experience, it has to be clear and complete, like teaching our patients new ways to think and behave and modeling it for them. You can't say, here, think differently about this than that. The whole being must change.
Well, you're right that we don't want people making a lot of superficial or disjointed efforts when what's called for is a completely new approach.
Absolutely. In my mind, it's the only way to proceed. Otherwise, we'll have people going off in different directions.
Are you still confident you can achieve the goals for improved patient care and treatment?
There are many obstacles yet to face, but I assure you, we will make the improvements that are needed and create 2 units that will shine.
Are you still confident you can achieve the goals for improved patient care and treatment?
There are many obstacles yet to face, but I assure you, we will make the improvements that are needed and create 2 units that will shine.
Fine, Arnie. I'm excited, too, about the new ground you're breaking in your units. In fact, I'd like to talk with you regularly about
how things are coming along.
Oh, certainly, Jeff. I can always find the time to discuss my work with such a distinguished colleague.
Well, you said yourself there can be many obstacles to deal with. So I'd like to keep in touch with how your new people are working out, for example. I'd like to be ready to help if I can. It seems to me there are a lot of things that could slow you down.
Yes, that's true.
When I convinced Bob Byrne that the unit chiefs should proceed with their flexible plans, he was skeptical, so I assured him we'd have plenty of progress to show on other fronts. Wouldn't you know, he's here today to review how we're doing on reducing our overtime expenses. I'm determined to show him the kind of results he wants to see this time. If we don't build his confidence in us, he could make things pretty difficult.
These supervisors' worksheets summarize the overtime by ward in the units and by sections in the departments. Jeff follows up on time abuse in the units. I follow up on time abuse in the departments. Last month, we ran training sessions on techniques for dealing with time abuse, counseling, documentation, and so on. The managers have said they're already seeing improvements.
But overtime expenses are still high at 3.1% of total payroll. I approved additional overtime in the past 2 months in order to help you improve living conditions. We need to bring overtime back down. When do you expect to meet the target of 2%?
2 months from now. It'll take that long for the manager's corrective actions to take effect and show up in these figures.
But in another 2 months, your overtime expenses could be so out of line you'll never recover your budget. I think a more direct approach is needed. Don't approve overtime in the first place. That's the root cause of this problem. Managers can't have all the overtime they put in for. They'll find alternatives.
Such as staggering shifts or alternative staffing patterns. We plan to take steps like those after we have the data we need to pinpoint the sources of excessive overtime.
But in the meantime, why not scrutinize all overtime requests carefully and deny those requests that aren't justified?
Fine. Let's make the unit chiefs responsible for evaluating all overtime requests and deciding whether to approve them. That way they'll have more information to help them decide how to staff more efficiently in the future.
Jeff, what if you and I approve overtime instead? That would save the unit chiefs from an unpopular position, and people might think twice about requesting overtime if they had to do it through us.
Then maybe it's a better idea if they have to ask me.
You?
I don't want to put you in a bad position with your people. Overtime is a sensitive issue. People feel they're understaffed and overworked. If they have to come to me for approval of overtime, it'll take the heat off you.
And it'll bring overtime down quickly.
But is that the best long-term solution? Ultimately, we want the managers and unit chiefs to be responsible for their staffing budgets and to take steps to eliminate the causes of unjustified overtime.
True, but in the short term, we need to get overtime under control.
But is that the best long-term solution? Ultimately, we want the managers and unit chiefs to be responsible for their staffing budgets and to take steps to eliminate the causes of unjustified overtime.
True, but in the short term, we need to get overtime under control.
I still think the unit chiefs are in the best position to know when overtime is needed.
But how about when it's not needed? These figures suggest they may not know best when it comes to controlling unjustified overtime. No, I'm going to approve overtime requests myself. That will have the greatest impact on eliminating unjustified overtime. Besides, if we weed out time abuse now, it'll be easier for you two to help the unit chiefs identify more efficient staffing practices. You won't have unjustified overtime requests skewing the data.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah. Why in the world do we need to go to the executive director for overtime approval?
I know this is a little unusual. It's probably just a temporary measure.
Let me tell you why this is a mistake, okay? First of all, now I have to take an extra step when overtime is required.
Your people can request the overtime themselves. Why do you have to do it?
To protect my people. If they have to call the executive director for overtime approval, I'm afraid they won't do it. Second, how can she decide if overtime is justified? We'll waste a lot of time explaining. Look, can't you get Eleanor to change her mind and let me and the other unit chiefs manage our own overtime?
Eleanor's pretty determined about this. I don't think I can convince her that you should control your own overtime until we see how her approach works out. Meanwhile, If you're not getting the overtime approvals you need, let me know.
Well, we have some good news and some bad news. The good news is overtime expenses are down to 1.4% of total payroll.
Fantastic.
The bad news is that the way the units did it was to reduce their staffing levels. In some cases, down to dangerous levels.
What?
I'm afraid so.
This shows that Bowder's supportive rehab unit has been staffing at about 70%.
That's 20% below standard.
And we found large decreases in staffing in other units, too, except for Marco's admissions unit, where overtime remained understandably high because of so many new patients coming from the city.
Supportive rehab had also taken in a number of new patients, so their overtime should have increased, too. When these figures showed that it didn't, I saw a big red flag.
I'll say, at 70% staffing, there's no way they can be providing the care and treatment they should. Frankly, I'm shocked that people would understaff rather than request overtime when they need it, especially these days when they already feel overloaded.
Well, maybe having to come to you was threatening to the staff. Now, Jeff and I think it's best to give the responsibility for overtime requests back to the unit chiefs and section supervisors. The managers are beginning to step up to time abuse. They're counseling, documenting, and putting time abusers on notice. So part of this decrease in overtime is probably due to their efforts.
Now, let's give the unit chiefs a month. We'll be in a good position then to decide what other measures need to be taken.
I'm sorry, Jeff, but this hasn't exactly raised my confidence in the unit chief's ability to manage their staffing levels. I'll go along with your recommendation, but only if you two review their decisions regularly.
All right. I'll make sure the staffing levels and overtime are kept in balance.
Here's the report from the Governor's Commission on Quality Care. You know that surprise inspection a few weeks ago? Well, they cited us for over 50 violations.
What? You're kidding.
No, I'm not. I just talked to Bob Byrne. He's up in arms. Just 1 month after he stressed that we need to step up our efforts on living conditions, we fail on the very points he raised. I just got an "I told you so" from him.
Oh, this is terrible.
That's right. If we don't take corrective action and pass the CQC's follow-up inspection, we could lose major funding. I want to meet with all the directors this afternoon. In the meantime, get with the unit chiefs to start remedying these violations.
Okay.
We need to develop an immediate plan to correct each violation, and then we need to decide how to prevent this from happening again. As you can imagine, Bob Byrne is very upset about the report.
We're upset too. That inspection was a raid.
What frosts me are the inaccuracies. Like citing an insufficient number of toilets, the standard is 1 for every 6 patients. We have 1 for every 4 in the areas that they cited.
They cited an expired elevator inspection on Ward 23, but there's no elevator on Ward 23.
It says here majority of patients idle. Well, it was Sunday, when we don't have activities anyway because it's the big visiting day.
I think they went after us because Mahata replied curtly to some picky questions. His ward was shorthanded and he was doing 10 things at once. Right after that, they went through here with a fine-tooth comb, just looking for things to cite.
The abusive patient treatment they cited is unfair, too. That was a Mahata breaking up a fight in a dining room. The CQC saw 2 patients being taken away. Now, what they didn't see was that earlier the 2 became violent, and the Mahata tried many things before he finally had to pull them apart.
Look, I think the inspection was a hatchet job, too. But face it, we got caught. Most of these violations are legitimate deficiencies. Bob Byrne expects to see a plan tomorrow. By Monday, we have to submit a response to the CQC describing immediate and long-term corrective measures. Let's take these violations one at a time and decide what actions to take. Hugh, let's start with you. Supplies and work orders?
I'll have the plan written up for you tomorrow.
Well, that takes care of the immediate steps we'll take. But those aren't going to prevent this from happening again. I think we're relying too heavily on the unit staffs to resolve these problems.
I agree. And specifically, we're expecting too much of the unit chiefs. They don't have the time to closely monitor conditions and follow up on every problem.
What about a committee in each unit? Select maybe 1 person from each ward to form a new internal quality assurance committee. They'd inspect the unit, say, once a week and report problems to the unit chiefs. Then the unit chiefs can focus more on solving problems and not have to be so responsible for finding them too.
You mean like a mini CQC inspection?
Please.
Wade, I think it's a good idea. Someone's got to check on compliance, and the unit chiefs can't do it alone.
Maybe it's a good idea to have quality assurance committees, but, you know, part of the problem is that each of us is responsible for only a part of unit operations. Abe for activities, Shirley for nursing services, Hugh for supplies and maintenance services. No one besides the unit chief looks at the total picture.
You just gave me an idea. What if each of you adopted a unit and became responsible for all conditions in that unit? When there's a problem, the unit chief decides what steps to take. You review those steps, arrange for the support needed, and follow up. If the problem isn't corrected, you find out what the obstacle is and resolve it.
So, if I adopt the admissions unit, I'd be responsible for all conditions in that unit, not just the activity programs?
Exactly. And if you can't resolve a problem, you get action from the director who can.
I like the idea of each of us having the full scope of accountability. The unit staffs are overwhelmed. Once they identify a problem, the real issue is getting it taken care of. If I were responsible for a unit and I learned they couldn't get a work order completed, I'd say to Hugh, my unit isn't getting action, do something.
But can't you do that now without adopting a unit?
Well, let's be honest, I'm functionally responsible for nursing services, so that's what I look at. But if I were responsible for the total picture, Hugh would hear about uncompleted work orders, Abe would hear about poor activities, and so on. By the same token, if Abe thought my nurses were obstacles to his activities, he'd say, hey, they're not getting patients to my activities. Find out why and resolve it.
I'll vote for adopting a unit. Focusing just on our own functional area is too narrow to be as helpful as we need to be.
But adopting a unit would mean reorganizing ourselves and trying to be all things to all people instead of just doing our jobs better.
That's right. I think we should stay with what we know. I'm not qualified to understand all of your functional areas.
Besides, the unit chiefs are in the best position to decide what they need. We should help them, but not by taking over their jobs. I think they would resent it. Each of us should simply sit down with the unit chiefs, develop a plan for full compliance, and set some specific deadlines with them.
Why not start with the quality assurance committees? If that's not enough, we can always adopt a unit or try something else to support the unit chiefs.
Jeff, the unit chiefs report to you. What do you think we should do? Jeff, the unit chiefs report to you. What do you think we should do?
I'm for both the quality assurance committees and adopting a unit. The idea of a champion for each unit appeals to me. I mean, we're asking everyone else to view their jobs in a new light. We should too. I think adopting a unit will show the staff everyone's going to pull together to solve our problems.
I agree with you, Jeff. We should do both. Adopting a unit is a way to strengthen teamwork with the unit chiefs. Also, in giving the unit chiefs more help, each of you will get first-hand knowledge of conditions and a better understanding of the problems the unit staffs face. And the quality assurance committees will get the ward staff actively involved in evaluating their own work. I think that's a key to the success of our teamwork approach.
All right, then. How should we get started?
I guess the next step is for you to decide what units you want to adopt.
I'll take supportive rehab. With a new nurse administrator and new nursing staff in that unit, I'm a logical match.
The adopt a unit idea is working great. You know, my staff was sure you would all come charging in here issuing orders, but instead, you got us more help. With you, Whitaker, assigned to our unit, we get faster responses on repairs, work orders, and supplies. The staff is really encouraged by the results.
Well, that's how we hoped everyone would react.
Well, it hasn't been easy to get over our reaction to the CQC report. My staff felt our unit came out looking much worse than we really were, because we were in the middle of reconfiguring the wards. We hadn't settled into a routine yet. But we've put a plan into action to remedy those violations.
What steps are you taking?
Well, my treatment supervisors and treatment team leaders and I, we all worked out a plan together. Now, our violations were in 3 areas: supplies, repairs, and inadequate patient activities. All right, we realized after the wards were reconfigured, the reorganized staff didn't have good procedures for checking supplies and equipment each day. All right, so this week, each ward is developing its own routine.
Well, that's fine, as long as they start following their new procedures right away.
Oh, don't worry, we will.
And even though it's taken some time to involve everyone in developing the new procedures, I think it was time well spent.
Well, I guess that's in keeping with our teamwork approach.
Getting them to wrestle with the problem of establishing better procedures helped them see the need for everyone to expand their roles and responsibilities.
Good. In the long run, we won't be able to do more with less until we get people looking at their jobs differently.
It's just too bad it took a CQC report to spark these improvements.
It's been a month since the CQC report, and the CQC does an unannounced follow-up compliance inspection within 3 months, so they can show up at any time.
Well, my unit still hasn't got those repairs done, even though I have spoken to the Director of Administration about it 3 times.
I checked on that work order today. The repairs will be done tomorrow, I promise. I'll do them myself if I have to.
I'll say one thing, adopting a unit has certainly changed your relationships with each other. And I think adopting a unit is helping us get in compliance. Do you?
Yes. Oh, of course. The unit chiefs have commented on how much faster things get done when one of us runs interference for them.
That's how it was supposed to work. What about the quality assurance committees in each unit? Active yet?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yes.
What about improvements for procedures and monitoring conditions?
In most units, the unit chiefs ask their ward staff to come up with their own procedures, and they're finalizing those now.
So, you all feel that progress is steady and we'll soon be in full compliance?
Absolutely.
No doubt.
Then that's what I'll report to Bob Byrne. Jeff, something's got to be done about supportive rehab. I was just over there and it's a mess. And I see they have the lowest ratings this month from the Quality Assurance Committee for their living conditions.
Bowder's got a new nurse administrator, 2 new team leaders, and a lot of new nursing staff. He spends a lot of time with them developing treatment programs, so living conditions are left up to his other staff. And when they get flooded with new patients, well, they drop the ball.
I've been hearing that for months now. He's not on top of his problems. And remember, when we asked the unit chiefs to reduce overtime, he cut his staffing to dangerous levels, which no doubt caused living conditions to suffer and contributed to some of his unit's CQC violations. I'm beginning to think Bowder can't handle the job.
Well, it's true that he's torn between the administrative and the clinical aspects of his job, but he's a brilliant clinician in the dysfunctions his 2 units treat. We're lucky to have his clinical talents.
But he's not running those units effectively.
Well, he is making progress.
Like what?
He's reorganized the wards in both units. He's developed treatment programs for 7 of the 10 patient groups he's got. He's training the staff in therapeutic models. And he spent a lot of time assessing his patients, which has led to dramatically improved treatment of his most regressed patients.
But living conditions continue to fall below standard. Can't the treatment team leaders do more to help the ward staffs deal with their administrative problems?
Bowder wants them to concentrate on the treatment programs. He also needs to improve the 2 new team leaders' management skills. Apparently, one of them doesn't have a good relationship with the ward staff she oversees.
Well, we can't just let these problems drag on.
I know. I'm not ignoring them. I've been encouraging him to give more attention to his administrative responsibilities.
Jeff, I know we fell below standards this month, but it's a temporary situation. We got 15 new patients in just 2 days.
I realize that, but we need to figure out how to prevent new patients from causing such a problem. It'll happen again. And you know we're going to have a follow-up CQC compliance inspection any day now.
Yeah, I know. The bureaucrats. They count rolls of toilet paper and check if the patient's socks match. They focus on superficial things.
Arnie, I know how important your clinical work is to you, and that the administrative side of your job takes time away from clinical matters, but the standards for patient living conditions aren't superficial. We're talking about the quality of care. That includes both clinical treatment and a healthy environment. Don't you agree?
Of course, of course.
Now, perhaps you need to hold off on some of your clinical work and give more attention to the administrative aspects.
Jeff, hold off on my new treatment programs. Now, that's my most important function. And we're right in the middle of a major breakthrough.
All right, Arnie. But I'd like to spend some time in supportive rehab. I may see some things you or your team leaders can do to make progress quickly. And I'd also like you to permit Mitchell Rusk to work with your team leaders on getting the unit into compliance and keeping it there.
Mitchell Rusk?
Yes, Rusk is a staff specialist from the regional office that Bob Burns sent to help us.
Help us, Lord help us. Another bureaucrat, more interference.
You don't have to deal with him. I'm suggesting that he work with your team leaders. I mean, that's where you need the most help. And I'll ask Shirley Drew to spend more time with the nursing staff on your wards.
All right, let Rusk work with the team leaders and come and live in our unit if you want to. I suppose the sooner this unit meets everyone's expectations, the sooner I can get on with my clinical work. So do whatever you want.
So I've tried to talk with him, colleague to colleague, about resolving the problems. For a while, he gets more involved with his people's day-to-day management problems, but then he reverts to his non-directive style and concentrates on his treatment programs.
So the results aren't lasting.
That's right. So now I'm stepping in again and giving him some help until his staffs develop their management skills.
Do you think that will solve the problem?
I think it has a chance.
All right. So one option is to help him develop his staff's administrative skills, especially since he tends to favor the clinical side of his job so much.
Yes, that's probably always going to be his primary interest. That's why we hired him 5 years ago, and that's why we gave him 2 units to manage 18 months ago. He's our clinical expert on the patients in both his units.
Then what about keeping him as a staff psychiatrist and getting someone else in there to manage?
Oh, I'm sure he wouldn't accept that. Management is important to him because he sees it as the way to control the total care his patients receive.
But he's not giving attention to the total care.
I know. But I think we'll lose him if we demote him back to staff psychiatrist. And you know how hard it is to recruit a top-notch psychiatrist, especially with our budget.
Then maybe we should create a new position for Bowder as chief of psychiatry for those 2 units and get someone else in there as an administrative chief.
I hadn't thought of that as a possibility. That would let him give full attention to what he does best. I suppose another alternative is to relieve him of the administrative responsibility for supportive rehab. He'd keep administrative responsibility for special evaluation and clinical responsibility for both units.
That should make it easier for him to manage the administrative side.
But rather than welcome the relief, I'm sure he would see it as a step backward.
Well, we ought to make a change of some kind. What do you think we should do with Bowder? Well, we ought to make a change of some kind. What do you think we should do with Bowder?
I'd like to try again to make it work with Bowder fully responsible for both units.
Do you think you can get Bowder to keep working with his treatment team leaders on their management skills rather than always giving priority to their treatment programs?
Well, if not, I'll work with them myself or get someone to help them until we're confident Bowder can rely on them to handle the administrative side.
Jeff, it's ironic, isn't it, that someone who can change the behavior of severely regressed patients hasn't developed the management skills of his team leaders.
I guess. But treating patients is his profession.
My point exactly. He doesn't yet view management as a professional responsibility on a par with his clinical work. This problem will be endless unless Bowder learns how to develop his team leaders so they can handle both sides of the job. And he's not going to learn if you step in to do it for him.
I guess you're right.
And even then, he'll continue giving minimal attention to the administrative side unless you make it clear you expect something different.
Bowder knows he's expected to meet the standards for living conditions.
Maybe so, but he also knows how much you value his clinical talents. Don't you think he believes that you're willing to condone a lot of his neglect of his administrative responsibility?
I think the problems in Bowder's units may be solved.
That's good. And is Bowder over his anger at being demoted, as he calls it?
Well, pretty much. At first, he felt I had betrayed him by taking away his administrative responsibility for supportive rehab. After he saw the improvements fall into place, though, he acknowledged it was for the better.
Do you think it's in the cards for Bowder to be reinstated?
Well, it's a personal challenge to him to get reinstated. He wants to show us now, through his improved management of the special evaluation unit, that he can manage supportive rehab, too.
At least now he has a crystal clear idea of what's expected. I'm delighted to announce that for a change, we can start our directors meeting on a big note of success.
We passed the CQC follow-up.
With flying colors.
Well, this will be a real morale booster in the wards.
Yeah, maybe now we can breathe a little easier.
What about Bob Byrne? Do you think this will help him breathe a little easier?
Oh, I've already talked with him this morning, and he's really pleased. I think this has done a lot to build his confidence in us. But Byrne did start questioning me about whether we'll make our census goal this year. Now that the CQC is behind us, census management is our #1 priority. Right now we're at 1,440 patients with only about 2 months to go. I have to either tell Bob Byrne how we intend to reduce the census to our goal of 1,400 patients or make a strong case for why that's not realistic.
Well, that's hard to project because it's not just a matter of discharging patients, it's also how many we're taking in. I mean, the admissions unit alone is up 250 patients again this month, largely because of the backlash from the Lansing murders. You know, the patient who was released from the general hospital and then shot 4 people? Now the hospitals in the city won't release any psychiatric patients. They commit them and then they send them to us.
You know, readmissions are also inflating the census. Some of the same patients are returning here month after month.
A lot are readmitted because they don't have the skills to survive. Often they don't even know how to take their medication.
Well, one of our new activity programs teaches patients how to medicate themselves. But so far, that's for a small, select group.
Another obstacle is the lack of community programs for patients from the city. When we're ready to discharge them, we find the city's community services are swamped.
I recognize all the obstacles, but we have to reduce our census each year for the next 5 years until we're down to 950 patients. So if we're having extraordinary problems in the first year, Bob Byrne needs to know that. Our long-term target may be unrealistic as well.
Since we're constantly getting new admissions and readmissions, how many patients will we need to discharge over the next 2 months to meet this year's goal?
Well, many of our new admissions are discharged within 2 weeks. If we disregard those short-term cases, we'd probably need to discharge 60 patients in order to reduce the census by 40.
Jeff and I are already working on a systematic way of identifying low-risk patients for accelerated treatment and discharge. Now, it's always a judgment call as to who's ready, but we can control the risk if we have a good patient analysis system on which to base our decisions.
How far along are you?
Well, we're at least a month away from having the first set of profiles. Those will identify the patients who are most ready for discharge. Then, we plan to select a small group and test an accelerated treatment program designed especially for them. So it'll take another month or 2 to treat and place them, and another 2 months to assess how successful their treatment has been and whether they're being readmitted.
It's the best way to both reduce the census and keep the quality of care as high as possible. Otherwise, we get into revolving door care.
Can you speed up your efforts to identify the readiest patients?
Not really. We're still gathering the data we need, and after we have the information, we may find there aren't as many as 60 patients that would be appropriate to put in an accelerated program.
Oh, that's possible. Or, more likely, we'd find that the 60 patients have a wide range of treatment needs. So we'd have to develop several different accelerated programs for them.
I agree that your patient analysis system will be extremely useful. Keep up the work. But let's look at other options we have in the short term. I mean, I think I could go around to the units and select 60 patients who we think can make it in outside programs if we give them some extra attention to prepare them.
But we can't let our census goal dictate our treatment.
Oh, I agree, Jeff, and I don't want you to do anything you're not comfortable with professionally.
But we all know there's a small percentage of patients whose stay could be shortened if they receive some additional, more individualized treatment.
You know, the thing that bothers me about giving extra attention to 60 patients so that we can discharge them quickly is, even if we do it successfully, it diverts our resources from identifying the best long-term and lasting solution.
Right, it's a quick fix.
But if we simply explain the situation to the unit chiefs and ask them to select their 60 lowest risk patients for accelerated treatment and discharge, there's a good chance they'll come through for us.
Whether it's intended or not, telling the unit chiefs we want to achieve 60 discharges in 2 months sends the message that we're more concerned about numbers than quality of care. I don't want the judgment of my staff about what's best for their patients to be clouded by trying to win a numbers game.
I don't want to play a numbers game either, but the unit chief should understand that census reduction is a priority, and we should be upfront about how many patients we have in mind. Otherwise, they won't have the same expectations as we do. The point is, asking the unit chiefs to focus on their most promising patients will prompt them to reevaluate those patients and their treatment plans. They may find they can do a lot without much shifting of resources. What do you say, Jeff? Can I tell Bob Byrne he can still plan on our meeting the census goal by the end of the year? I don't want to play a numbers game either, but the unit chief should understand that census reduction is a priority, and we should be upfront about how many patients we have in mind. Otherwise, they won't have the same expectations as we do. The point is, asking the unit chiefs to focus on their most promising patients will prompt them to reevaluate those patients and their treatment plans. They may find they can do a lot without much shifting of resources. What do you say, Jeff? Can I tell Bob Byrne he can still plan on our meeting the census goal by the end of the year?
If you want, I'll work with the unit chiefs on identifying candidates for discharge, but in the meantime, I think you should prepare Byrne for the possibility that we'll discover the census reduction target won't be met in 2 months' time.
I don't want to tell Bob Byrne we may fall short without describing specifically what we're doing to try to achieve the goal.
Well, then here's what I propose. First, that John and I continue with the patient analysis system.
Good. I agree we should try to avoid anything that would slow you down on that project.
Second, I'll tell the unit chiefs that we need to reduce the census by 60 patients, but emphasize that they should not compromise their standards or judgment. Then if we've identified 60 patients, great. But if we can't justify accelerating treatment and discharge for that many patients, then in my view, we have to tell Byrne to expect less.
I'll go along with that. This has to be done right. We'll be in deep trouble if there are unfortunate consequences from even one inappropriate discharge.
Jeff, I can work on getting your people more specific information on the different requirements for community programs that currently have space. That might expedite placement.
That would help a lot.
Thanks, Tina. I'd like each of you to follow Tina's example and identify what you can do to help Jeff and the unit chiefs achieve the goal.
All right. Thanks, Eleanor.
I'll admit, at first my treatment team leaders and I were tempted to sign up every patient we thought might have the slightest chance of succeeding at a special treatment program. But then you emphasized that we don't have a quota to meet and that our plan should include methods we would want to implement on a permanent basis, not just a quick fix. It caused us to step back and study the problem carefully.
So, what have you come up with?
Well, the first thing we discovered was that discharges for city patients are sometimes delayed because of poor coordination with community programs. Now, we've met with Tina Carmack and agreed how her staff and my staff can communicate better with each other and with the city programs in order to speed up placements.
Sounds good. Better coordination with the community programs doesn't require much investment on our part, doesn't interfere with your other plans, and will have a lasting impact.
That's right. And that's true for our other steps here, too, like bringing some of the living skills training sessions into the open wards. And look down here, we've had an...
Jeff, that seminar you chaired with my staff on assuring successful discharge is leading us to develop a new dimension in providing for the total care of our patients.
Oh? How so?
When we reassessed our patients to identify candidates for discharge over the next 2 months, we were surprised by the number who were readmitted because their families had burned out caring for them at home and brought them back to us. So, we're realizing the importance of finding better ways to transfer what we learn about working with our patients to the family members.
Fine, Arnie, but what exactly do you plan to do?
Well, for example, I'm talking with Abe Greenswald about his activity therapists developing living skills training programs that involve family members together with our clinical staff. We're all enthusiastic about this idea.
Well, sounds pretty ambitious. Not something you could get very far with in the next 2 months.
No, that's right. It cannot be done overnight. So, meanwhile, the social workers are going to prepare some family orientation and counseling programs, and we'll use the patients we discharge to their families over the next 2 months as a study group to guide us in developing our ideas for more successful discharges.
Great, Arnie. Oh, so these are some of the first profiles from our patient analysis system. We've already selected a small test group of patients whose profiles are similar.
And the treatment program for the test group is already underway.
I'm impressed. I see how you can apply this same approach to several different types of patients.
Well, that'll be our next step.
And once the system is refined, we'll be able to diagnose and place new admissions in appropriate treatment programs more quickly.
Not to mention that the treatment programs will become more effective. Putting patients in groups according to their profiles allows us to focus treatment more directly on their needs.
That's what's most impressive to me. There's a good chance your approach here will increase the probability of a successful discharge. And that's the surest way in the long run to achieve all our goals, reducing the census, controlling costs.
Well, I'm sure more comfortable about meeting next year's goals than I was this year.
Well, you're all to be commended for the fact that you will meet your goals this year. I'll admit I was a bit skeptical early on. It seemed to me that your ideas were much too ambitious, like the computer information system that led you to these patient profiles.
Well, our system didn't help us with this year's census goal, and I thought it would be ready in time.
But you're going to make the goal anyway?
Only because Eleanor pressed me to find a more straightforward solution.
I'm sure that's partly because I was pressing Eleanor. To me, Morgan Center's like a big ocean liner. It takes a lot to change direction. I felt that without giving everyone on board specific rules and procedures, you'd crash on the rocks.
After the CQC report, I thought we were sinking fast. I was losing faith in our teamwork approach.
That's funny. I was just learning the advantages of your teamwork approach.
Well, I'm convinced that I need to be more a hands-on manager at times. I've always been reluctant to step in and be directive, thinking it best to be more like a colleague than a manager.
Really? Your style has helped you to recruit and hold on to a number of talented professionals.
But some of our best results have come from my getting them to focus on the desired result and specifying guidelines for the solution rather than just letting them go about it the way they think is best. Well, for instance, I was really surprised that the unit chiefs identified 72 patients for accelerated treatment when we only needed 60. And they've generated so many good ideas that'll help us from now on.
Jeff, is it still your opinion that these patients will have as good a chance for successful discharge as others?
Oh, yes. We are not pushing anybody out the door. Actually, one of my concerns about meeting next year's goals is whether community programs can take our patients when they're ready for discharge. We might get way ahead of them.
That's something we should discuss with Tina Carmack. She and the other directors should be joining us now for our year-end review.
Yes, I'd like to urge Tina to try 2 of the community outreach models I saw last week. They were developed by one of the smaller facilities in our western region.
Hi. It's 2 o'clock. Are we still on for the review meeting?
That's right, Tina. And your timing is perfect. We were just talking about you.
Uh-oh. Sounds like more work.